There is no better time to talk about the global corridors and gateways and transport systems than there is at the moment. Clearly in the context of the recent summit in Beijing and also EU efforts to build out corridors in the bloc of 28 countries, there are major questions over how we manage these systems, how we regulate them, and how you govern these intercontinental networks, whether they be by rail, road, or maritime routes. Our panel session today, Gateways and Corridors Exploring Good Practice, looks to answer some of these questions. We're lucky enough to have representatives from all across the chain. Let me just go through them one by one. First of all, on my right here is Mathieu Grosch. He's the European Commission's coordinator for the Orient Med Corridor. That's one of the trans-European networks for transport, going from the northern German port cities all the way to Cyprus. He'll talk about that shortly. We also have Michael Christidis. He's the Secretary General at the Organization of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation. Clearly a lot of experience there diplomatically and also with regards to projects around the Black Sea region. Then, of course, we have Professor Baolin Shi from the Chinese side. He's from the Chinese Academy of Transportation Sciences inside the Ministry of Transport. Thank you. Then we have Mr. Francois Daven. He's the Secretary General of the Intergovernmental Organization for Inland Carriage by Rail, otherwise known as OTIF. And finally, Mr. Nagi Amin. He's Acting Director at the Suez Canal Authority. So he brings a lot of experience from the maritime side. Maybe if I ask you first, sir, to give a presentation, shortly address the key elements of your work.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. And I will make a short summary of what we are doing on European level, and especially as a European coordinator for Trans-European Network. The transport networks have a very long story on European level. And I remember in the past, I would say, all the efforts to make a real transport network on European level was always the addition of national priorities. And until 2012, I think it was a new approach and a very interesting one. On the one hand side, we have a legal basis defining 9 corridors on European level. 9 corridors, multimodal corridors, rail, road, inland waterways, linking ports with urban nodes, linking airports together. And these 9 corridors stay for about 80% of traffic in Europe. For each corridor, you have one coordinator. It's my job. I will speak about it and the governance we introduced there. On the other hand side, we try on European level, together with the member states, to define common standards. Technical standards for the railway, for instance, but also for inland waterways, for the high-speed lanes. We try to have technical standards for communication too in the IT system. And something very important and very different with the past, we had a new financial instrument. In the past, the co-financing system on European level was about 10 to 15% for the projects. With the new Connecting Europe facility, as I call it, we are able in the cohesion countries, for instance, and on the East Med corridor, where I'm coordinator, is very important, we can go up to 80% of funding, direct funding. In other countries, like Germany on this corridor, we can go up to 40 or 50%. It means that we have common standards and we have an interesting, let's say, an interesting financial instrument. And in this financial instrument, I would insist on one new aspect too. We had earmarked the money for the cohesion countries for the first period until 2017. And this earmarking was a very interesting thing because it was the use or lose it principle. And in governance, I think it was very interesting. On the one hand side, each country knew that they could get this money, but they had to speed up the preparation of the dossiers and the pipeline of the projects too. And what we saw was very clear. After 2 years, because of the preparation of the legislation and the financial instruments and the priorities together with the member states, we had a very interesting pipeline of new projects. And this pipeline brought, in a first call for this project, let's say about 3 times the money we could spend. And in the second we had the same situation. And if we compare this financial instrument with other instruments at European level, we sometimes have the contrary there. They are waiting for good projects, and I would say we have too much good projects. So I think this approach was a combination between common standards on technical level, even common standards on information level, a dialogue with the member states, but going down even to the region, going down to the municipalities, to the urban nodes. So this multi-level approach was a very interesting one. And what we call the regulation on the one hand side, we could call it this top-down procedure, but also the cooperation with the region and with the urban nodes is a bottom-up. The combination of these both methods, I think, was part of the success story of what I call this European network. My corridor, European Orient East Med corridor, going from Hamburg down to Greece and down to Cyprus even. In Cyprus, for instance, we have, of course, only the motorways of the sea, and the ports policy is the most important one, and some roads. But nevertheless, I think this approach makes clear for everybody then that cross-border, for instance, must be a priority. And if you see a lot of member states, they invest in their own projects, but it's always difficult to find and to convince them to have a cross-border thinking. And our corridor approach was to say, in every project, we must try to find this added value for the corridor as such. A good investment in Bulgaria, a good investment in Romania, can be and should be interesting for Germany, for instance, too, even if economically there is a big difference between these countries. And I think now in the first of 3 years of this experience, I think it was really an interesting one to see that step by step this corridor approach was an interesting one. The last is a remark I would make is, of course, we see through our experience that we need 3 things especially. We need this combination of top-down and bottom-up. We need this agreement on common standards, and we need a good dialogue with all the people involved, all the stakeholders involved in a project. We need this dialogue because we saw in Europe, and those who know some bigger projects in Europe know the evolution of some projects. If you don't prepare it on the basis with people directly concerned, and I was not only in the European Parliament, I was a mayor too in a city, and on the line between Paris and Cologne, I know that people who were involved in the information, involved even partly in the execution of a project on the basic level of the community, of the urban nodes, this is one of the most important aspects, I would say, for the future. The last thing is that, of course, our corridors try to make a link with our neighbors too. Connecting Europe means, of course, connecting the people in Europe, but we must and we try to find a coherence with the project in our neighbor countries too. And for instance, I speak about Turkey, and I think about the Western Balkan for my corridor. And a good airport and good ports in general, I would say, connect even Europe with the world. So this connecting approach we have, I think, can be very positive on every level, on the local level, the regional level, the national level, the European, and even on the global level. This is our approach, and I hope that by fine-tuning this legislation and by fine-tuning the financial instrument for the future, we can reach the aim we have in 2030, so it is a long-term project in 2030, to have really this core network, these 9 corridors completed with the European standards and make the link with the neighbor countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was a very valuable experience from the EU side there on how to develop corridors. If I can ask you, Mr. Christidis, to go and give a presentation from the side slightly to the east from the Black Sea region, which of course straddles both the EU and non-EU countries.
Well, good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for having me here. And Indeed, this is a very logical continuation of our discussion. After reaching Southeast Europe, the neighboring countries, these are, to the east at least, the countries surrounding the Black Sea. 2 words on the organization I have the honor to represent, which isn't exactly a household word. Many of you might not have even heard of it. It's the Organization of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation, a regional international organization with 12 member states, which has been active for the last 25 years. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary with our summit in Istanbul, where we are based just 1 week ago. So let me say that we are the oldest and, institutionally speaking, the most mature organization promoting the economic cooperation in the broadest sense of the term among our member states and beyond. And of course, promoting economic cooperation, it is only very natural that we pay huge attention to transports, to connectivity, to facilitating trade. And ours, as you understand, is a very important geostrategical region because it is exactly the bridge between Europe and Asia. It is an energy hub in the sense that not only our member countries are, let us say, producing energy, but we are also a region through which a lot of pipelines, oil or gas pipelines, reach the big markets in Europe. So, and of course, whatever we try to do in what concerns transports, as was said before by Mr. Grosch, we also try to coordinate and integrate with other greater projects, like exactly the Trans-European Network, and of course also with Traseca in what concerns our extension to the east. Traseca, as you know, is interested in communications between Europe, the Caucasus, and Asia. 2 of our pet projects in this sector of transports are, the first, the Black Sea Ring Highway, and the second, the motorways of the sea. 2 words on them. The Black Sea Ring Highway is actually a project to upgrade existing roads to a certain level of standards. And it is a ring highway around the Black Sea, yet with eccentric lines to the capitals of our member states. And since I mentioned them, let me tell you that all riparian states to the Black Sea are our members, plus the Balkan states of Serbia, Albania, and Greece, which have a special interest for the Black Sea, and the Caucasian states, Azerbaijan and Armenia. So the Motorways of the Seas, on the other side, is a project to improve the infrastructure in 41 ports of our member states, not only in the Black Sea, also in the Aegean and the Adriatic. And of course, a third project, which is perhaps proceeding even better, is the facilitation of trade. That is the reducing red tape and bureaucracy in what concerns the transport of people, goods, and so on. 2 more words on the ring road, because it is very important for our meeting here today. The Memorandum of Understanding between our member states has been signed in 2007. I can't say we have developed a lot since then. I mean, we have the route of the highway, but still we need more comprehensive data in order to promote the, let me say, the financing of this huge project. We are talking about almost 7,000 kilometers. Some parts of it are ready, especially in Turkey, in Greece, and some of them also in Georgia and Romania, but we still have a long way to go. 2 words that this new factor which is shaping developments in the area, and this is the modern concept of the Silk Road, or the One Belt, One Route project with the Chinese initiative. We will be hearing more on that later, is a new factor, as I said, and I believe it is enhancing even more the geostrategic role of our organization, of our member states. Because whatever new connectivity will be established between Asia and Europe, be it railway, be it optical fibers, be it roads or shipping lanes, they will all cross through what I call BISEC territory, because we cover the region from the Arctic all the way down to the African coastline. So this is the reason that we as an organization wish to be very much involved in what goes on in these new projects. But of course, beyond infrastructure, we are also very much interested in the civilizational, cultural dimension of this modern Silk Road concept. I mean, especially tourism and the exchange of people and ideas in the region, because this means better dialogue, better understanding, and greater cooperation. Let me, in conclusion, say that our organization puts together some, it's a non-homogeneous group of states. So we have our difficulties, most of them are known to you, but still the fact that this organization is there, is active, and every year representatives of our member states meet at least 60 or 70 times a year, sitting around the table and discussing projects, common projects that could be of benefit to all of our member states, or to most of them, is the added value of this organization, which should be seen also as a, let me say, first instance mechanism of confidence building. We hope we can be more project-oriented and more efficient in the next 25 years of our life. And of course, can only be so if we can cooperate better with other international organizations, and why not also mainly with the EU, which has this facility of organizing its projects and financing them much better than we can do. But this is something we can discuss later with Mr. Grosch. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that valuable insight from the Black Sea region. Now we travel even further east across the steppes of Central Asia and look at the Chinese perspective, obviously invaluable given the sheer scale of the One Belt, One Road initiative. Around $900 billion of investment is estimated to be needed for projects along those chains. And to hear about that, we'll now listen to a presentation from Professor Baolin Shi from China. He will speak in Chinese. You all have headsets, I understand. It's channel 6, I believe, for the English translation. Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm glad to have this opportunity to introduce the recent 3 years for the One Belt, One Road initiative. In September and October of 2013, Chinese President Xi Jinping has proposed the initiatives of jointly building the Silk Road Economic Belt and 21st Central Maritime Silk Road. The initiatives received highly international attentions and positive responses. Belt and Road Initiative is committed to improve the connectivity of Asia, Europe, and Africa continents and oceans, and to strengthen cooperative partnerships along the corridor, to build a comprehensive, multi-level, and integrated network, to achieve diversified, independent, balanced, and sustainable development. Belt and Road Initiative has built an open and inclusive platform. All countries are equal participants, contributors, and beneficiaries. This year from May 14th to 15th. Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation was successfully held in Beijing. By summing up all the conclusions, the future cooperation direction was further clarified, and the specific roadmap for construction was planned. It validated a series of key projects to be implemented, put forward the goal of building the Belt and Road into a road with peace, prosperity, openness, innovation, and civilization. Transport is the fundamental sector to achieve the vision of Belt and Road, playing a significant role as pioneer. The prerequisite to build the Silk Road is building the road, and the foundation to realize free passenger and freight flow. China attaches great importance to transportation development and actively involved in vision outlook, action development, and mechanism design. Transport sector should will from the top level, utilizing existing platform to actively strengthen communication and coordination with countries along the Belt and Road. Aligned with the plans and standards to promote agreements among all countries. Over the past 3 years, the Ministerial Declaration on Transport Development in Asian and the Pacific region and the 5 years Regional Action Program has been issued. China has set up the Secretariat of Central Europe Maritime Cooperation, signed cooperation agreements with the ASEAN, some planning blueprints such as Central Asia Regional Transport, Greater Mekong Sub-region Transport, and the China Railway Express construction were implemented. At present, China has signed more than 130 bilateral and regional transportation developments involving railway, highway, maritime, air, and postal transport with countries along the Belt and Road, such as the Intergovernmental Agreement of Shanghai Cooperation Organization member states on facilitation of international road transport, and the ASEAN-China Maritime Transport Agreement. Also, China has joined nearly 40 conventions and protocols developed by International Maritime Organization, using this platform to promote maritime interconnection and mutually beneficial cooperation between the countries along the 21st century Silk Road. We also joined the Intergovernmental Agreement on the Asian Highway Network, Intergovernmental Agreement on the Trans-Asian Railway Network, and Intergovernmental Agreement on Dry Port, established by the UNESCAP. To promote the implementation of Belt and Road Initiative, transportation infrastructure connectivity is of great significance. From my perspective, the general concepts of building the transport infrastructure connectivity are upholding the spirit of the Asian Silk Road as peace and cooperation, openness and inclusiveness, mutual understanding and mutual benefit, and adhering to the principle of joint discussion, building and share, aiming at building an open, integrated transport system, promoting the soft link of policy, regulating, and standard, focusing on key corridors, cities, and projects, connecting highway, railway, and port terminals. And we try to promote the construction of inland transport routes along the economic corridors such as China, Mongolia, Russia, New Eurasian Continental Bridge, China's Central Asia to West Asia, and China-Indo, China Peninsula, and China to Pakistan, to promote the transportation facilitation and cross-border logistic network congestion. And we strive to support to build the Belt and Road into a road with peace, prosperity, openness, innovation, and civilization. Thank you.
For that analysis, very useful to get an outline of the project as you see it. Now we shift back to Europe, and actually somebody responsible for linking up the two continents, Francois Daven. He works for OTIF. He is the Secretary General of OTIF, I should say, and he's going to tell us about regulating the rail sector and specifically talk about getting more post and mail and packages between China and Europe.
Okay, good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you for inviting OTIF to make a short presentation about what we are trying to do to connect Europe, Asia, and Africa through rail. What I will try to do here is to make a brief presentation of what we are doing and give an example about regulations, because one of the problems we have today is that we have a lot of regulations. In particular for rail, we have different regulations. We have still not a global regulation, I will say, in Europe. It's almost there, but it's still not completely there. And it's even worse when we are leaving Europe. So I will try to take an example, which is a new development that we are entertaining in collaboration with the Universal Postal Union to develop a service of delivery of parcel between China and Europe. That will be an example which could be topical with the presentation of China about the new Silk Road project. Okay, a few words about OTIF. OTIF is a relatively old organization since we started in 1893, so with the first convention about international transport. We started in Bern because it was basically the only place where in Europe, Germany and France could agree about something about international regulation. And it's worth mentioning that it's also in Bern that the first convention about international telegraphs, that ought to be the International Telecommunication Union, was founded in 1965. So in a way, in Bern, the first technical pillars of the globalization were invented in the city of Bern, which was the only place to have this kind of dialogue. And interestingly, after the international, let's say, Telegraph Union was founded in 1865, was also founding the Universal Postal Union in 1874, which is also one of the pillars of the first globalization. So what is OTIF doing? Basically, we are addressing from an intergovernmental point of view all the legal and technical questions related with rail. First of all, and that's historical, we are issuing freight and passenger contract, what we call legal interoperability, in order to be sure that there is one and only contractual framework for international traffic, and that is valid for freight and passenger traffic. What we are also doing is a regulation about dangerous goods since the very beginning, since the foundation of the organization, because indeed it was absolutely mandatory at the time, and it's still mandatory, to have one single regulation for the transport of dangerous goods, because you cannot imagine that you have a German regulation, a French regulation. If you do that, it will be impossible to have any traffic. And what we are doing, and it's more recent, it was under the auspices of the Interoperability Directive at the EU level, we have a technical regulation about how to safely exchange vehicles. What we are trying to achieve here is a technical interoperability in harmonizing the requirement of OTIF and the requirement of EU. In terms of geographical coverage, we have 50 member states. So basically, we are active from Morocco to Pakistan. Pakistan acceded recently in 2014, and we try to have a common understanding of the rail regulation within our area. You have different colors on this map. Basically, the deep blue are the countries that are implementing the whole regulation, the contracts, dangerous goods, and technical. I will not enter into detail, but what you can see here is that we are still a regional organization. Well, you can see that Russia is part of the organization. That is true, but it's a little bit misleading because Russia is member for 30 kilometers. So mainly the Russian system is covered by another organization, which is in a way our sister organization, which is the Organization for Cooperation Between Railways. The Russian acronym is OSGD, which covers Russia, China, most of the former Central Asia Republic, and we also share Eastern Europe countries like Hungary, Poland, and so on. Why I'm speaking about OSGD? To show that we have an issue if we want to develop railways at an intercontinental level, that we have a lack of common regulation. What we have tried to do within the OTIF and in collaboration with another institution that is called CIT, Committee for International Transport, is to have a bottom-up approach and to reconcile the contracts, the freight contracts, between Europe and Asia. So there is a common instrument which is called the SMJS consignment letter. Why am I speaking about this common contract? That's because we are working on a project about sending parcels from China to Europe. And this drawing that I borrowed to the Russian railways shows that mainly this route is within OECD country in China and Russia. So how organizing seamless traffic, how to interface railway network with the postal regulation, that's what I will try to explain shortly in this presentation. Why I took this example, it's because I think that's important to speak about infrastructure, to speak about technique and so far and so on, but that's also very important to speak about contracts, to speak about how we can have the different levels of regulation interacting with each other. So what is basically the project? The question is to have international parcel delivered from an originating postal operator that would gather the parcel to a destination postal operator. That doesn't cause any problem within Europe or even perhaps within Europe and Russia, and in particular, it doesn't cause any problem if you go by aviation or sea, because there is a uniform regulation both for aviation or sea. But as a matter of fact, there is no uniform regulation, as I showed for rail. And despite there is no regulation, economically speaking, that will be very interesting to use rail, because, for example, by sea, you will spend 40 days for this kind of parcel delivery. With train, it has been proven with experimentation, it's possible in 13 days. So the question is how to interface this postal regulation with international carriage by rail. And international carriage by rail has a specific drawback or complexity, is that all markets are not open, so you need to have successive carriers to organize your delivery, for example, and that's the simplest way to think to it, to send a parcel from Germany to China, you need first to have a European carrier up to, let's say, the Polish border, then a second carrier up to the Chinese border, and then a third carrier up to the destination postal operator. So that's a complexity. This complexity is handled by our regulation in collaboration with one of the OSGDs. That's the reason why we have a common contract between Europe and China. And the main question from my point of view, and that's an ongoing project that we are running within UPU and also with the Council for Trans-Siberian Transport, we try to define what are the necessary interfaces to be defined for making this kind of project possible. What we try to defend is an approach where we hierarchize the different regulation layers in order to minimize the regulatory work. Because if we want to, every time we implement a service to have a new regulation, we will not achieve in time to have those services, and it will take, and we all know that in international level, making a regulation evolving, that 5 to 10 years. So what we need is to tune the interfaces that most of time are not at the regulation level, but at the guidelines level. For example, for sending a parcel from Europe to China, well, you have a contract of retail, then you have to go into the postal networks, that's the first arrow, then you have to go into the railroad transport network, then transport the good, explaining all the difficulties that I talked about before, that you have successive carriers. Then you have to do the opposite way. But what you need to respect is the independence of the regulations that already exist. You have already a regulation of contracts for buying and selling goods. You have already a postal regulation that, by the way, is covering the custom issue. And you have already, as I explained, that's basically the job of OTIF, a regulation for the transport contract. So what you need is to concentrate on the interfaces. So that's the reason why I wanted to have this example, to advocate the fact that it's quite important to concentrate on this question of interfaces. And then you have a lot, indeed, of questions to resolve. That's an ongoing project within UPU. For example, what kind of information you have to exchange, but that is not regulatory. What exactly will be the best way to include the custom document within the transport document, and basically for the rail transport, a lot of specific questions about performance level, proof of delivery, and specific liability and security feature. But having this approach in focusing on interfaces should allow to have a simple and rapid solution. So thank you for your attention.
Francois, I propose that we move on very quickly just to the maritime route. Mr. Nagy, you work for Suez and other parts. Should I just shout in the meantime? Mr. Nagy, if you want to give the audience your experience from the Suez Canal Authority, would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, my colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very nice to be here with you. I am delighted for these invitations, and I am lucky to be one of our colleagues to share the same idea. And shortly, believe I want to explain a brief idea about what is the importance of the Suez Canal. Suez Canal, as we said here, effect on the international economy, and it's a gateway of the world trade. If we are going to say, what is the Suez Canal? Suez Canal in the middle of the way of between Europe and Asia, and connecting Europe and Asia through the maritime Silk Road, goes north around the Horn of Africa, and goes through the Red Sea. This is a part of the Suez Canal here. It's very important to be a gate of world trade, because which happened the last August 2014, we already launched a very big mega projects. We're digging about 72 kilometers double to facilitate the transit of ships, with the draft about 66 feet. This means that it's accommodated for any kind of container ships, the new and the coming generation of ships of containers. Why the containers? Because containers trade, it represented about 99% of the trade between Europe and Asia. And this means that it goes through the Suez Canal and serving the world trade to transfer and transporting goods, foods, and all kind of cargoes to Europe, between Europe and Asia. These projects have been done in 1 year, and of course it's facilitated the transit for ships in both directions and eliminated the time of the transit time of ships to 11 hours only. This means that saves time and saves the cost of transportation for cargo by maritime service. Suez Canal share of the world trade about 8% of the world trade maritime, and of course also it's about 20% of the world container trade. And I mentioned before that 99% of the container trade between Asia and Europe passes through the Suez Canal. There is here that Suez Canal transit last 15 years ago, since 2000 till 2015, and there is a gross rate comes in the number of the vessels passing through the Suez Canal. Also, the Suez Canal net tonnage, the cargo tonnage about 1 billion ton per year. This means that helping and serving the world trade through the maritime Silk Road. And of course, we have very impressive projects can be done to help as Asian comes to facilitate and serving the maritime Silk Road. This means that we are accommodated for 100% of container ships and about 92.6% of the bulk fleet of the world and about 62% of tanker fleet. And 100% of other kind of ships can pass through the Suez Canal itself, and this means that we are helping and serving the world trade as we. This means that we increase the competitive advantage compared to other alternative routes, and we still, the maritime transportation is the cheapest way to transfer and transport all the kind of cargo, comparing with other kind of transportation on the models like railway or roads. Even it's very fast and facilitate, eliminated the time. And this is accommodated a new coming generation of container ships as a container fleet of the world. Reducing the time, transit time, this also means money and of course saving the cost of transportation and increasing the safety of navigation. This is our aim and target. As with it, the ability of Suez Canal is to respond to any developments in the global shipping market in terms of fleet or trade and ready for any future developments. Also, Suez Canal reduced the transportation costs and reduced the cost of goods and increasing the incoming economic growth rate. Improving the supply chain and the logistic concepts, which serves as international trade movements. This means that we are going to development of Suez Canal itself and how this comes by continue its role in the global trade services, and the waterway remains the first and the best compared to the other routes. Where the administration of the canal carried out of continuous development through the development of an integrated system as follows, we are keen to make a very facilitate navigation channels and safety and navigation support. And also we are keen to equipment and machinery renewing and make it a good fleet for helping the transit of vessels. We establishing a new marketing policies by customer satisfactions and customer orientations, and of course developing our human resources to be established for a new strategies and to be a part of the maritime Silk Road. We are keen to help and investment project for the economic zone. And of course, we are going to looking for the same platform of investment for this territory. Suez Canal can be represented as a gateway of the world trade and of course an economic corridors for all countries along the Silk Road, which are providing to improve itself. Thank you for your attention, and we have a very short video film explaining what is the transit and how we can make it this mega project for Suez Canal in 1 year. And this is it help our service to know a short idea about Suez Canal. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nagy Amin. It's a very interesting look into the Suez Canal, obviously a key global trade bottleneck. Just a word about me quickly. My name is Joshua Pisana, and I write about transport at Politico Europe. So for us, we've been looking with great interest at the amount of rail freight coming from China towards Europe over the last year or so, especially the first service to London, for example. Many of them pass along the corridors that the 10T network covers in Europe. Interestingly, though, for us, it's a question of how you plug these systems in together, because, of course, you have the One Belt, One Road initiative. This is sprawling in itself. You also have the 10T networks, as we've discussed. And I wonder, from your side, Matthew, how do you see the combination of these initiatives? Obviously, the area that you work on, the Western Balkans, there's been a lot of Chinese investment in railroads there and at Piraeus port, of course, in Greece, too.
I think on the one hand side, we have a lot of work on European level to have a real network. So we may not make a lesson to everybody around us because we have to do a lot of work at home. We have to do our homework. The second thing is, I think that our approach for the moment is to have a kind of cooperation and mutual information. What are the vision of your network tomorrow, and to try to be coherent with what we are doing. I personally, for instance, for my corridor, we have close, let's say, meetings and relationship with the Western Balkan, because if tomorrow we try to extend a network and we want it, and we want to have a common approach for a network for the Western Balkan without involving European decision making in this area, I think this is the first thing to prepare. The second thing is that we spoke about technical standards. It is quite impossible to have everywhere the same standards. But what I always stress is we should avoid having standards that make other standards impossible in interoperability. This is very important. So I think everybody can make their own research, can make their own evolution, but in the evolution have a look what is the possibility of interoperability with the other. And the last thing is, and this is this, and I do it, the exercise on my corridor for the moment, but I always say invest about 1 billion to win 1 hour on a 5,000 kilometer corridor, and then wait 10 hours at the border because there is no technical or no administrative cooperation between the member states. It is a nonsense for me. So I think we should have a look of all what I call these nonsense rules you have sometimes in cross-border areas, or the lack of cooperation, a lack of information. And that's, I think, could be, these 3 principles could be a very interesting one. First, consultation, what is your vision? The second thing is technical interoperability, try to avoid impossibilities. And the third thing is try to see what kind of rules can you avoid. And that's why I think what you are doing, not changing the legislation, but try to find the interface at the border areas, I think is a very good approach.
Thank you. And just to go to Michael quickly, the region you cover in a way is a microcosm of this, because you, of course, deal with EU members that surround the Black Sea, but then also non-EU members that have, I imagine, very, very different regulatory playing fields. So how do you deal with these differences? And in the year since 2007, the decade, how successful have you been in getting this cross-border cooperation going?
Well, as I said, our main aim is to remain in connection with bigger projects around us. And that's why For instance, take the Black Sea Ring Highway. When it will be finished, most of its parts will be parts of other trans-European networks or even Traseca network. So this is very important. Indeed, we have this issue of, let us say, harmonizing legislation and especially documentation. But we have progressed a lot in this. I mean, we have diminished red tape and bureaucracy. We have the open one window, let us say, facilitation. And we are trying also to, let us say, have common certification, the documentation. We want to reduce documentation, but also harmonize it. We are successful. We could be more successful. After all, the biggest room of all is the room for improvement. There is no doubt. But let me say that it is very difficult because at this moment there are so many projects which are being promoted. We heard about the European effort, which is very well established and very well organized. We hear now about this one road, one belt initiative from China. There is no transnational authority which is overlooking all these efforts. So it's a huge mosaic where the pieces are falling slowly in their place and with a great, let me say, loss of time. For instance, you see the difference of how eager our member states in Eastern Europe are to approach this Chinese initiative because they see a new source for funding very important infrastructure projects. But at the same time, you see the concern if all of this is coordinated and it is, let us say, integrated or can be integrated with what has been going on in Europe. And this fact that you mentioned, that we have member countries of a different level of connection to the EU is an issue. But I believe that as we are trying to improve our relationship and make it more concrete and focused with the EU, these issues are slowly falling into the background. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just to go to you, Baolin, obviously there was a very big summit in Beijing recently. Many world leaders were there. Part of the strategy there was obviously to discuss the regulatory frameworks. I guess the One Belt, One Road initiative is almost unique in that many of the major projects are not in China. So you need to be looking at funding international projects very far away. Can you maybe talk about the on-the-ground experience, what practical measures were agreed in Beijing, what you see as being the progress over the next year or two on getting this corridor set up?
非常高兴啊，大家对"一带一路"啊都非常关注。
I'm glad that many international organizations has paid attention to the Belt and Road initiatives. Belt and Road has connected to the European countries and some countries in the Central Asia area. And those areas are some of the most active regions in the world. The Belt and Road construction may be very important to the construction to the Asia, European and Africa continents and oceans. The construction of the Belt and Road, the next plans may be focused on two aspects. The first aspect is to improve the hard link of infrastructures, and the second aspect is to reinforce the software links about the policies and regulations. The previous, our two colleagues have talked about some regulation frameworks in the Black Sea area and European area. We want to reinforce the facilitation of the transport besides the infrastructure connectivity. And we also want to improve some of the cooperation focus on the regulation, standard, and some technical issues.
In terms of infrastructure, is there sufficient infrastructure in place to get the kind of volumes of freight and postal services that you talk about moving now between China and Europe?
Well, I think at the infrastructural level there is basically no major problem, because what you have to know is basically 1% of the total freight between China and Europe is going by rail. So there is a huge room for improvement, even in Russia, meaning the Trans-Siberian network has still room for having traffic, and that's one of the reasons why the Council for the Trans-Siberian Transport is part to the project. So I think to come back to what has been said by Mr. Grosch, nowadays the main problem is the administrative interfaces, because from my point of view, the main problem that rail services have on international level is that most of the network are designed nationally. They are not designed internationally. And that is about to change. I think there have been a lot of improvement due to the EU action of this interoperability concept. And I think that's very important, because interoperability doesn't mean uniformity. Just that doesn't mean that there is a standard that will be imposed to everyone. That means that there will be ways for different standards, different way of thinking to work together. And if I took, for example, what happens in Russia, what you have to know, well, there is a specific technical standard in Russia. The gauge is different, it's larger in Russia. But for example, all those technical specificity are already within the EU regulation, and in a way already within the OTIF one, because there is technical specification for interoperability that take in account most of the specificity of this network for a very simple reason. Lithuania, Estonia, and so on are part of the European Union, and most of their network is at Russian standard. So, well, I insist on the fact that the question is how to manage interfaces, how to define interfaces, and I think that can have huge return on investment. I will take just another example. For the first experimentation between China and Russia, it took 13 days. But on that 13 days, 1 day was lost at the Polish border for custom reason. When you think to it, it's quite impressive.
That is, it's very interesting that a whole day was caused by delay at just administration. And I think also it's very interesting what Berlin said, to make this distinction between the hard issue of infrastructure development and then the soft issue of policy and regulation. One side that obviously is included in the hard issue of infrastructure development is capacity at key bottlenecks like the Suez Canal. And you talked about a little bit a moment ago about the prospects for expanding the Suez Canal. But Nagy, can you just tell us a little bit more about how important it is in the context of the global One Road initiative?
Thank you, Coach. Really, I haven't the chance to explain it more about the expansion of the Suez Canal, because it's a very big issue to facilitate the transit of cargo from Asia to Europe. And we did this in 1 year, and of course eliminated time, and time it means money. So the transportation cost it's decreased, and of course facilitate the cargo transported from China to Europe, and this is also serving the world trade. We did already shortly believe the length of the Suez Canal, it's about 193 kilometers. It's about now we duplicated the waterway by 112 kilometers. This means that facilitated and eliminated the time to 11 hours only. And I am hearing here about the facilitated documentations and standard regulations and the customers' problems and so on, and the time delay. And if you know, if it's about 99% of container trade going through the Suez Canal from Europe to Asia in both directions. we are serving, this is the maritime Silk Road, and the importance of the maritime Silk Road will bring new opportunities and a new future to China and every country along the road that is seeking to develop. We are establishing a new model of mutual respect and mutual trust, and we invited all investment in as Mr. Grouch said, Europe Union to come and invest in the economic zone of the Suez Canal. We had a very good master plan for the good maritime projects and logistic areas and distribution centers in the east of the Port Said, serving the Mediterranean trade. And also it will be connected to the Black Sea because we have a lot of potential for the Suez Canal itself to facilitate the time and the cost. We have a very promising project and mega project in this area, and of course the Chinese know what is the importance of this, and starting to investment in the Horn of Africa in Djibouti by the National Bank, and of course we have an opportunity to make very good industrial projects and transportation projects in this area of the Suez Canal corridors. It will be an a model of economical corridors for this area, and of course we are presenting our service as a gateway of the world trade. Thank you.
Thank you. This is interesting. Look into the situation on the maritime side. Can I just ask if anybody has any questions? I have terrible eyesight, so wave your hands. I think this gentleman was first, just in the second row. Is there a microphone around, or? It's coming to you now. Just wait 1 second. If I could just ask if you introduce yourself, and maybe we'll take a few questions and keep it brief at the beginning. Just here at the front, the gentleman just there in the white shirt. Okay, go ahead. It's for the translation. Yeah, so just here at the front. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm Kieran Ring from the Global Institute of Logistics. A very good panel, I enjoyed it. So just a couple of things. Going to the rail bit first, Francois, thank you for that. So, you know, we've been moving freight on that corridor quite successfully. Gentleman to my left was at DB Schenker, very concerned with that. So it is working. But DB Schenker didn't have the challenges that you outlined. For instance, I mean, they acted as one agent across the chain, right to Chongqing for Hewlett-Packard. So that was the case study, right? So why is it that the administration or the bureaucracy or the lack of bureaucracy that freight forwarders experience on that corridor, why can't you leverage that for mail? You weren't very clear about that. So in other words, are the terms and conditions for moving mail freight different to that of ordinary freight? And if so, what are the differences and why?
Yes, indeed, the regulatory framework is different because postal system has specific custom arrangement, actually. Okay. So that's one of the boxes in my drawing. And what has to be understood is that basically they have better custom coverage than usual freight. So one of the difficulty that we try to address is to preserve this advantage of postal custom arrangement. Okay. So we could definitely have a postal item within a container and doing it the way it's done usually. But what we try in the projects is to use the bypass and the transit agreement that the postal regulation has, which is why we took this layered approach in order to preserve this competitive advantage of post with rail. You have to know, for example, that with aviation, they have also a very specific treatment from a custom and transport point of view. So we try to preserve this specific advantage of post.
But I suppose, just to clarify, on the day that you had that 1 day delay, the train moved on and your container remained?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly what we are trying to solve, because Obviously, when the trains enter into the EU custom territory, this was a new way of thinking custom transit at the Polish border. So we are working with UPU and W and Poland and World Custom Organization to solve the question.
Yes. And finally, last question, Nagy, I just want to congratulate people at Suez Canal. 350 days is all it took you to widen that canal and do what you did, which I don't think the world quite understood what you achieved. But how are you going to build up the logistics? How are you going to develop the logistic zones now that you have the infrastructure? What is the strategy at the Suez Canal for it to become a logistics hub? The next phase, please.
Thank you, Karen. We already finished our mega project, and in the same time, we are going to preparing the master plan of the economic zone. And of course, we divided it to 3 zones. One in the south, it's well for heavy industries and logistic maritime services, and the middle zone in the middle of the canal. It's about 40 or 60 kilometers far in the north. It will be for Technology Valley and for the technological industries. And of course, in the north, at the gate of the Mediterranean, for the East Port Said port, it's a terminal, and we have a very big project there. We made a new terminal. It's about 3 kilometers wide, and it will be facilitated for any kinds of terminals, RoRo, and services, marine services, and bunkering. And it will be promising projects, and we invited all investment by regulations and new documentations by one window, as I heard from my colleagues, and we make a facilitate for investing in there, and we are going to invite funding banks and Asia banks of Chinese and European to come and invest it here for these corridors. It will be privilege and benefits advantage for the trade of Europe and Asia, and of course eliminating time. This means cost and money, and I heard here a lot of problems for borders and so on. Just buses through transit of Suez Canal and go to Piraeus in Greece, no problems to go inside East Europe to the West Europe, and very fast to overcome all the obstacles of regulations, border between China or Russia or other countries in Europe. And already we are have good opportunities, and infrastructures have been held in these areas. And of course, we will show through a short video how it is promising this region to invest in it. Thank you.
Thanks. So do we have any questions on the other side of the room? Maybe the gentleman at the back was very quick. Right in the back row there. Do you have a... we'll just go to the back and then we'll come back to the front.
Are we going to see that video?
Yeah, we will do that. That'll be right at the end. That's the treat for the closing few moments.
Thank you very much. I'm from United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. This session topic is very important, and then all the presentations very interesting. And then some of them mentioned our UNESCAP's pioneering work for the connectivity, like Asian Highway, Transition Railway, and then also the agreement for the China, Russia, Central Asia. And then I just want to give you some additional information. That's probably the answers to some of the questions here. It's like the Secretary General of BSEC mentioned that cross-country and across regions organization. We have already created Inter-Regional Coordination Committee on transport between Asia and Europe. So that's an intergovernmental body to coordinate the corridors between Asia and Europe. And in addition to that, we are now creating an intergovernmental organization for road transport. You know, the OTIF and the OIZD for railway, and they also have a cooperation. I know you have a very close collaboration. And then for maritime, that's International Maritime Organization, and then the civil aviation is by ICAO, and the road part is missing. So that's the super, our oversight body for the intergovernmental collaboration for road transport. And then that will contribute to the entire transport space for the Europe and Asia. So that's for the connectivity. For cross-border transport, I agree with the view of EU. There's you know, it's difficult to say to get a uniform standards or the uniform rules and regulations. And then what we are doing is a harmonization, and try to get a close collaboration and a coordination for the rules, regulations, and the standards. So far, we have done, we can say, probably 10 areas for the harmonization, and then still a lot to do. And then recently, in the year 2002, we worked with our sister organization in Europe, did corridor planning for Asia and Europe. And then we are now updating this plan, and then make it more comprehensive, including infrastructure and then also software transport facilitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for just mapping out the agencies and the international organizations that are responsible for governing some of the modes of transport. I wonder if I could just flip that question very briefly back to some of our panelists. Balin, do you think that the current international organizations are doing enough work on how to kind of blend regulation in this area? Do you think, maybe you mentioned the Shanghai Cooperation Organization earlier, do you think that another organization might be necessary specifically to look at these issues of very specific regulation in the sector?
Some agreements proposed by the international organizations is very important to the Belt and Road Organization. Some of the international organizations has already made achievements in the Belt Road construction. For example, like the IMO and some railway corporation organizations, they have all made many achievements. Besides these international organizations, China has also signed many bilateral and multilateral agreements with other countries. By now, we have signed maybe like by the 2016, China has signed 16 lateral and bilateral agreements with other countries, focus on the highway construction and some facilitation of the transport. Those are all very important to facilitate the construction of Belt and Road.
Thank you. Coordinator, how much time do you and also your colleagues spend going outside the EU and talking to stakeholders from other regions about infrastructure projects that link up with your vision?
Thank you. I would say that for the moment we take really time to get better contacts to our neighbors, but we don't go far for the moment. And I think that the next step, and we are preparing now a kind of vision paper for the future for the European network. This aspect will be an important one. Two aspects. The first is neighbor and this longer routes, I would call them, and the second thing is how to manage these problems. And we have even the same problems on the corridor, because on European level you are not responsible for all the aspects on the corridor. So what I did, I as such asked an agreement of all the member states on my corridor to tackle some problems where the member states are still responsible for. And I think this mutual approach and this mutual agreement to tackle these problems and to find solutions could be a very good and interesting example also on these bigger roads, because if you don't have this, let's say, memorandum of understanding for the future, I think it would not work, and it will not work, and this is for me very important. So I think it will be a big part of our job for the future, but already for the moment we are trying to find some solutions for a non-European legislation, I would say, in some very important areas in transport.
Okay, and Michael, is it easy getting people around the table on these issues? Is it easy striking agreement on the nitty-gritty, the very small details of infrastructure construction and also of how to manage railway networks and roads?
Well, speaking for my organization, I can't say it is difficult, although I can't also say that it is very easy. We have our problems, there is no doubt, because of all the differences. I mean, in regulations and so on, and because of the differences in the level of development of our member states, or even their level of connection to the EU, their obligations there, and so on. But I would like to come back a bit to the previous issue. I believe that this, let me say, coordination effort is becoming ever more important, because you see now the difference, and I mentioned that before, the difference in how Eastern European countries are perceiving this westernward drive of China, which includes very, very important infrastructure projects. And you see also the concerns which are being expressed in Brussels or in northern European countries, which believe that this Chinese approach is on a, let me say, local, sub-regional level, that the Chinese are very much interested in Piraeus and the railway link from Piraeus up to Central Europe. That's why we have the project, I don't know where it stands, of the railway between Belgrade to Budapest. We have countries in Eastern Europe promoting themselves as the most important link on this Silk Road. There, China is always present. I'm thinking about Georgia, I'm thinking about Romania, I'm thinking about Azerbaijan. So we have to, how can I say, streamline a bit all of this and coordinate, because it might eventually, how can I say, be another point of friction in how we are dealing with those issues. And this is something that we certainly have to avoid, because transports, connectivity is very, very important.
Thank you. Can we just go back to the floor? I know there was a very enthusiastic question just down here.
Actually, I had my hand up first,
okay,
so
you've got the
pass
mic
it on
as
to you afterwards. I'm Beher El-Hefner from the World Bank, and I have the privilege of leading the Transport Corridor and Logistics Group, and I actually focus on the Western Balkans. So I'm very familiar with the corridors that you were talking about, Mr. Grosch, and the issues on coordination in particular that you're talking about. And I think one thing that you did not bring up, and I think you're just being humble, the model that the EU has come up with in the corridors is brilliant in terms of having the coordinator who is from someone from a country that is not in the corridor, to have the neutrality, looking into the issues, having the policy issues, and having the stakeholders, as you mentioned. The diagnostics is done very well. What is still an issue, and you touched on it now, and that's going to be important for moving forward, is actually the management of the corridor afterwards. And you did allude to having agreements between the countries, but there's no mechanism that is going to have every country or force every country to do their part for the corridor to operate efficiently. This is an issue even within the EU. Now we start thinking about the Belt and the Road, that's going to be a much bigger issue. That's number one. Number two, an issue that you touched on, absolutely right. In the Western Balkans, about 1% of the regional GDP is being lost because of delays at the border. So clearly there needs to be a way to monitor that. Right now, there is no systematic manner within the European Union or the Western Balkans to monitor the time it takes to see how long it crosses the border. If that is not going to be monitored, it's not going to improve. So this is an area I think it needs a lot of attention. Third point, which is very important for the One Belt, One Road, Connecting Europe facility that you mentioned was exactly to address the issue of sometimes it's not to the benefit of one country to invest in it, but it affects its neighbors. So this comes and helps it. The One Belt, One Road, or the Belt and the Road, is going to go through numerous countries. CEF is a grant. Now, when you look at the One Belt, One Road and the countries it's crossing, there will need to be a financial mechanism that is going to, and it's not going to be just loans, that's going to allow the other countries to see the benefits of building their part, because they're not only going to benefit from a transit route. So that's a question that we'd like to hear the panel's view on.
So very interesting points. If I just go very briefly, we're almost running out of time now, but just to go to Matthew quickly, has there been any proposals to set something up internally within the EU to evaluate how much time is lost at borders in transit?
What I said, we are making the experiment now on our corridor, and we lose 10 hours in only between two countries on this corridor. So we sent the questions last 2 weeks ago. We will make an evaluation in September, and I think this work will be an example even for the other corridors. And we can and we could extend it to the Western Balkan. But let me make one important issue too when we speak about corridors, infrastructure. You need two things. You need at least mutual confidence between the partners. This is for me very important. And to have this, you need political, let's say, common vision and political stability too. I will not go into details, but you understand what I mean. This is very important. And the second thing is, we need investments. And Chinese investment, for instance, on my corridor are very interesting. And I had some very interesting contacts in Greece too. But what I always say to all the partners on the corridor, if Chinese money is there because you have no financial capacity as such for these investments, please be aware that you will solve a short-time problem, but not a long-time problem. And this, I say it to my Chinese partners too when we meet. Chinese must not be cheap money for a short future. We need a long-term planning, and this is very important. And I think besides all the aspects of technology and so on, which are very important too, I think this approach, and when you spoke about several links, I know that in some countries it was an alternative to the impossibility for the moment to have the financial means to realize an infrastructure. But after infrastructure, you have to manage it. And after the management, you have to make the maintenance. And if you take Europe in general, we have a lack of investment in maintenance, in infrastructure in general, even in very important and economically very wealthy regions like Germany. So when I speak about cheap money, I really know that cheap money can be very dangerous for the future and for the infrastructure.
Thanks. And if I can just switch to Balin again quickly, give you a chance to respond to the question too. Also, is there signs in Beijing that funding systems can be set up for the long term, that apparatus can be there to finance these corridors, not just to build them over the next few years, but also to maintain them in the decades ahead?
The infrastructure connectivity, the investment is of great significance, and it invites all the stakeholders to make common efforts for One Belt and One Road. We have already built some of the investment mechanisms. For example, the Fund of the Silk Road and the Asian Development Bank. We utilize these international organizations to build this mechanism and to solve the problems of the insufficient of this fund investment. And we also need some of the international organizations to cooperative on these issues. For example, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and for the recently established the Asian Development the Asian Development Bank, and this is the most important ways to solve the problem. Actually, there may be some other ways. For Chinese experience, we recently have always been promoting the PPP, the public-private partnership, and we have been using these ways to solve many of the infrastructure investment problems. And we need some of the legitimacy and the policy support to make this work. And we think we want to use this kind of method to be implemented in the Belt and Road construction.
Thank you. Very rapidly, I will say that, at least for railway, what will be very important is to have a consistent software, as you said, a consistent regulation, because from my point of view, the main risk is to build infrastructure that at the end of the day will not be interoperable. So from our point of view, we see the organization as a forum, as a very open forum. And to take a very specific example, I talk about contracts, but for the contracts we have already some things that goes from Europe to China, but we don't have an interoperability concept that goes from Europe to China. And that's what we are working on at this time. Beginning of June, we will have a technical committee, and in this technical committee, we will have representatives from EU country, but also from representatives from the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. It is building a new network, and they are interested in having the same software, and also Chinese representatives. So, meaning that I think that we have collectively to make a huge effort to have the understanding that investing in common software will be very efficient.
And Michael just had a quick follow-up there as well. And just I give you all a chance to prepare to close up the session because we're basically done. I wanted to give each of you a chance to sketch out in a minute or less your vision of the governance of these corridors in 2030 in the future. But Michael, if you just speak to that.
Well, I will just wanted to add that one has the impression here that when we are talking about the Silk Road, there is one route which will be connecting Asia to Europe. This is not the case. We are talking about a system of connectivity, of roads. There is the Northern Silk Road, there is the Central Asian Silk Road, there is the Southern Silk Road. So we have to understand what we are talking about. And of course, one of the most important aspects of this effort is the opening up of all the Asian republics which are landlocked. And they will have means of communicating better both with Asia and, East Asia, and of course with Europe. And let us not forget, I mentioned it before, today one of the most attractive brands in world tourism is the Silk Road. This civilizational, cultural dimension of the Silk Road is not to be, let me say, underestimated. The World Tourism Organization has some very, very important projects in this area, in this field, where all member countries, all countries in the region are participating, and it opens up an economic sector which will be of great importance. Wrapping up, as you said, I believe that the organization I'm representing will become ever more important in its role as the bridge between Asia and Europe. And of course, in order to undertake this important role, we will have to be more effective and more project-oriented than we are today. And this is what we are striving to do.
And Matthew, I guess you are prepared as a 10T coordinator with a plan for the future. You have a destination you want to get to. Where will we be in 2030?
I hope that in 2030 we will have this real core network on European level. But as a conclusion, I would say, for me, I love this topic, transport and mobility. But for me, the most important thing is that what you said, that if you connect people tomorrow, it has other social aspects which are very important too. So if not overcome not only these problems in transport, but we can find common approach, common values by connecting people for peace, for connecting people against climate change and so on. I think this is one of the most important aspects I see on the corridors and all transport in general. We are contributing to growth, of course. We contribute to create jobs, but connecting people is for me even a bit more important than all the rest. And I think this is a real European approach, because when I speak about the rail, I always say to my grandchildren, don't forget one thing. Railway in the past was part of the Ministry of Defense, and everybody wanted to do it on his own way. We try now to make people work together, and make people work together means really, for me, the real objective of European policy, and the policy, I hope, with our neighbors too. This would be my conclusion on this very connecting network.
Thank you. And Baolin, just to go to you, where do we see ourselves in 2030? What is the vision from Beijing?
As a vision, we hope to, from one aspect, to consider the countries along the Belt and Road, and consider different phase of the countries currently on. And we hope to, regarding this Belt and Road construction, we can have some agreements and cooperative works to reinforce the communication. For example, like some aspects I have just said. And we want to make this initiative better into practice, and we want to reinforce the development of all countries along the corridor.
2030, do you think you'll be successful in getting more post and parcels on the road, or on the rail track?
Well, for me, the vision at this time will be to have a full legal and technical interoperability, meaning that, as it was said, the Silk Road, it's a network of roads. And we have to think, at least for rail, but for the other mode, as networks. And I think the vision will be to be able to switch containers, as today we switch packet in data networks. If we achieve that, that will be great.
Thank you. And then, of course, Nagyamin, you have also the video. Can you maybe just give us your vision for 2030, and then we can play into...
This will be the answer of, we see interesting video for the audience, and it will be the vision of 2030 of Egypt and for North Africa. It brings opportunities and a new future to China and every country along the road that is seeking and develop. And of course, there is a new model, mutual respect, mutual trust. We hope so, and for peace for all countries and the development for each peoples. Thank you very much, and let us see the video.
And to the video.
For over 150 years, the Suez Canal has been the lifeblood of Egypt's economy. In August 2014, President Sisi launched the Suez Canal expansion project. A mega development to construct a new 72-kilometer-long canal which will allow for two-way traffic. The project will increase the canal's capacity and will maintain the Suez Canal's position as a major maritime trade route against increased competition globally. This audacious project is on schedule for completion and has been entirely funded by the Egyptian people. Over 64 billion Egyptian pounds were raised through investment certificates, a true testament to the country's resilience and its willingness to invest in its future. The new Suez Canal will provide the springboard for a major economic transformation that will begin with the development of the Suez Canal zone. The SC zone is strategically located astride the world's major shipping lanes and seeks to take advantage of Egypt's proximity to major global markets and the abundance of land and human resources to develop one of the world's most dynamic trade, logistics and manufacturing centers. The SC zone provides investors with a competitive platform to access over 1.6 billion customers globally under preferential trade agreements. We believe that we can build on our strong ties with our existing trading partners to develop further areas of opportunities and increase Egypt's share of international trade. With a large and growing population of nearly 90 million people, and with rising living standards, the domestic market also provides strong opportunities for investment. Our vision is to transform the SC zone into a world-class global logistics and industrial processing center that serves global markets and to create sustainable and high-quality jobs for the Egyptian people. Our aim is to create 1 million new jobs over the coming 15 years. The SC zone offers investors opportunities across all economic sectors. In the maritime sector, there are many opportunities available in the development of ports and container terminals, logistics and distribution centers, as well as shipbuilding and ship repair. The outlook for the manufacturing sector is equally promising, with opportunities in a wide range of industries such as pharmaceuticals, food processing, automotive, textiles, and consumer electronics. With a fast-flowing ICT industry in Egypt, the SC zone is the right place for new businesses and initiatives to grow and utilize the Egyptian talent pool. The SC zone is also well placed for the development of renewable and clean energy projects. To achieve our vision, the SC zone will create a new investor-friendly environment, which will be a blueprint for future development nationally. Investors will benefit from a true one-stop shop with highly efficient and streamlined procedures to ensure smooth business operations. In developing our regional strategy, we have considered the main development nodes along the Suez Canal. These are linked to Cairo via a series of expressways. A new expressway and road and rail tunnels will also provide access to East Port Said, with international links provided by Cairo Airport and potentially Port Said Airport. Within the SC zone, a number of existing large-scale industrial sites can form a basis for future development, such as 10th of Ramadan Industrial City and the proposed new administrative centre. Primary development centres lie along the Suez Canal corridor. In the south, the industrial complex at Ain Sukhna will build on the existing economic zone and port. In the north, East Port Said Port will grow as a global transshipment hub supported by a large new logistics and industrial area. Links to the interior will be enhanced with the extension of the inland ring road to Ain Sukhna and to a major new dry port near 10th of Ramadan, as well as by rail to East Port Said. Cross-canal connections are also under construction to open up the Sinai region. Over the coming 15 years, 3 major economic nodes will have evolved, linked to Cairo and each other by high-quality transport infrastructure. In the longer run, the development emphasis will shift to east of the canal and along the inland ring road. zone is not only about investments and jobs. It is also about integrated, sustainable communities where people want to live and work. The private sector will play an important role in supporting the development of these communities. Finally, the General Authority for the Suez Canal Economic Zone has the support of the government, the business community, and the people of Egypt. We are looking for partners to join us. We have listened to stakeholders from all parts of Egyptian society and the international community, and believe we have created a framework in which all parties can participate meaningfully in ushering in a new and prosperous future for Egypt.
So, dramatic way to end. We're running a little bit late, so I just ask you all maybe to join me in thanking our panelists and enjoy your coffee break.